Thank you, Montserrat. It's my great pleasure to moderate this session this morning, not least because as the representative of Global ATM, I'm usually the one answering the questions rather than asking them. But while I'm making my brief introduction, I'd like to invite the three panelists to join me on stage, please. Alexandre de Juniac, the Director General of IATA, Florian Guillermet, the Executive Director of the SESAR JU, and Pekka, who is stepping in for EASA, and we what a great person to step in for us as the chair of the EASA board. So please, can we sit Alexandra here?
Whoops.
Florian in the middle. It helps the communications people. We're having a switch of theme from yesterday, but it's one that fits very closely with what's been discussed, and indeed even with the Minister's comments on tourism, because essentially we're looking at whether aviation is going to be fit for purpose in looking forward. So we're going to be looking at emerging technologies, new entrants to airspace, and the threats and opportunities around cyber security. This is a huge topic that the panel and I need to fix in the next 30 minutes, so my introductory remarks are going to be very brief. What are we talking about here? Emerging technologies. We're seeing a lot of new technologies that we've been developing over recent years now being deployed in the industry. Things like space-based ADS-B, digitization and remote towers, new communication methods, system-wide information management, automation, and even artificial intelligence. At the same time, we got new entrants into the airspace, in particular drones and the UTM community at lower levels with remotely piloted unmanned vehicles in traditional airspace. At the same time, we've got lots happening at higher altitudes with balloons and other internet methodologies, together with commercial space vehicles flying up and down through the airspace. So there's a lot happening there. And all of this requires aviation to be very open in terms of its partnerships, its arrangements, and in particular data management. And that's probably a little bit ironic at the time when, because of cyber concerns, many other industries are actually closing down. So in our unique situation, how does all of that work? And so that's really my introduction. I'd like to understand from the panel this morning, how exactly are we going to embrace these new technologies, embrace the new entrants into what has traditionally been our airspace, and do that in a safe and secure way. So I'm going to turn to Florian first of all, because as head of the SESAR joint undertaking, Florian, you've been really at the front end of this with research and development. So can you give us, to start us off, kick us off with if you like, the sanity check of where actually are we today in terms of embracing technologies, new entrants in a safe and secure way?
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone, and thanks to IATA for the invitation. Maybe I will just step back a bit before talking about the technology itself to understand what's happening in our domain, which is not very different from what's happening in very other different domains. So what we face today is really a growing demand to access the airspace at large, whether it is for commercial aviation, where we see the growth picking up to the level we had about 10 years ago with in Europe an increase of 3 to 4% of traffic over this year. But we see as well on top of that additional demand to access the airspace for all sorts of different types of application. It can be lower airspace, it can be upper airspace, but overall we see this trend growing and growing because again the skies are becoming very attractive to run any kind of new businesses as well as traditional businesses. This growth, there will probably be some periods of stagnation, but we see a long-term trend developing, and for some element of it in relation in particular to the drones operation, for instance, we see a very significant potential. And I have no crystal ball, I don't know if it will materialize in 2025 or 2030, but that's clearly something we have ahead of us. In front of that, what do we have? We have a system to manage this traffic which is based on principles, on structures that were defined quite in the early days of aviation, which is very manual in terms of a lot of manual intervention to cope with the traffic and to make sure it is handled safely and efficiently. Which means that basically we have an air traffic management system that roughly is hardly scalable. It's hard to scale it up, especially quickly. It means we have to put in more power, pretty much with the same ratio of growth of the traffic. And it's difficult as well to scale down, which means that when we have a downturn of traffic, we still bear the cost of the system, which is a problem for the airlines, of course. So all what is happening around SESAR and in the technology at large, and to be frank with you, this would happen with or without SESAR. SESAR is a kind of catalyst to make it happening and to speed it up. What we do is to work on an increase of automation level so that we can scale up the system in a quicker manner, raising progressively the automation, and by this I mean the automation support we provide to the work of the controller and of the pilot, for instance, not a fully automated system. That's not what we're aiming at. And to do automation, you need data, so you need connectivity, so you need to exchange information. And here comes a number of opportunities, but as well a number of threats, as you have highlighted, and I will probably come on the cyber aspect later on. But what we do is not rocket science. It's really what's happening in a number of other domains, except we apply it to aviation, we apply it to ATM. So to summarize where we stand today, because that was your question, I would say that technology is there. It's becoming available. It's either available already or it is in the pipeline. The difficulty we face, and we all have to, I would say, work on, is how do we accelerate the pace of implementation? How do we speed up? Because in aviation today, we still deploy, and sometimes it's hard to deploy and implement technologies that have been developed about 20, 30 years ago for some of them, for instance, in relation to the data communication system. So how do we speed up? How do we fasten the pace of implementation is really the challenge, not so much the availability of the technology.
Okay, thanks, Florian. Pekka, I'll turn to you. Florian's described quite an exciting time in our airspace, I think, with a number of changes required and challenges there. So all of that will require a more enlightened and perhaps different approach to safety and safety regulation. So how does EASA see its role in this, and how do you see EASA as facilitating the challenges that Florian's outlined?
Indeed. And at the first beginning, I would like to say that when we are speaking challenges, mostly those are synonyms for difficulties, problems, development items. But in EASA language, it means, challenge means that a factor that we have to take care of. And it is question of when we are looking for the future, and also what Florian mentioned, we have a lot of new items in front of us. It is question of new concept of operations in many cases, new technology, new business models, safe integration of new space users. We will have more autonomous operations, and digitalization level is something that we cannot not even today to imagine. And from our side, from EASA side, all this means that we have to make totally new regulatory approach as a pan-European regulator, no doubt. And as we have experienced, it's a pity that we have accepted the situation where the regulation is well behind technical or any kind of development. We cannot afford it anymore in the future. So we need a lot of new concepts for our work. And in many cases, when we have new technical solutions to work with, we have to make case-by-case solutions. And only when we have experience, then we can make it scalable. And our clients, EASA clients, they are also, let's say, looking for regulation as soon as possible in order to enable the implementation. But if we like to keep our principles, maintain our principles, that whatever we are doing, it must be proportional and heavily related to the risk. And let's say, all of us, I think we have a dream what kind of approaches we should make for the future. But how to make it concrete? Yes, we need each others. We are learning all the time from the industry. And the industry has many cases, the expertise what we don't have. And the new approach means also that we are using those resources.
Okay, thank you. As the representative of airlines, Alexandre, how does IATA view these challenges? You're the sort of the main customer for our airspace, and we've got a lot of opportunities that have been described, technologies, but also new entrants who are going to come in and interfere with airlines' airspace, aren't they? So how do you see that, and how do you see the sort of safety and security aspects?
First of all, it is clear that we will not resist or prevent or block, this technological revolution. So in 20 years from now, we will have 85 million flights of drones. That's a fact. Mm-hmm. And it will probably, this estimate is probably low. So we will have more flying objects in the airspace. The airspace will be overcrowded. So it triggers two issues, the issue of safety and the issue of efficiency. Mm-hmm. So what we say is we have to adapt, and quickly. Frankly, our sector, the aviation sector, is advanced, but is not fast. We are quite slow to move, for good reason, which is safety, for a bad reason, which is conservatism. And we say safety, we should work on that. Conservatism, we should get rid of it. So what we are proposing and what we are working now is, we say if we want to cope with these issues, efficiency, safety, I don't know how many millions of flying objects every day in the air, we have to work together. So we have set up a group now, we are one in the sky, with regulators, safety agencies, industry, technology providers, to work together to see how we will cope with that. So it's what we see is work in a cooperative mode, and we will make it. But it will not be easy, because I'm a bit, sometimes I would just, with the assembly, share one point. You are hearing a lot of buzzwords with technology, drones, artificial intelligence, blah, 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 blah. Well, okay, it's nice words, but what it means practically is another story.
Okay, that's a good cue, because I'd like to turn back to Florian and say, having heard all of this, how ready are we in terms of the technologies and new entrants coming through? Can we rely on the fact that robust performance and safety requirements are being built into everything so that we will be secure and safe, or should we be worried and thinking about additional layers of protection and new requirements? What's your view?
So I think it's a bit of both, in the sense that with any technology and any change at large comes difficulties, including in terms of new threats, but as well solutions. And maybe just to give an example of what it can mean concretely, I'm moving to the drone domain, and that's quite interesting, because this is a domain where, while we had a lot of agitation and buzzwords at the start, we start to see more collaboration between aviation and those players. And for instance, we are launching a project in the city of Antwerp, in the harbor of Antwerp actually, where basically the purpose of this project is to set up a drone traffic management system for two applications. One which is to operate the harbor in the most efficient way possible, so that basically there is a constant monitoring from the sky of the harbor and of all its components, so that the flows of goods and the logistic can be optimized through having a real-time situation of the harbor. And it's coupled with basically drones application for the transfer of goods, and in particular of medical samples and medical applications like defibrillators and so on. So it's quite a complex environment. And so there are started to tackle it, and they've started to tackle the cybersecurity aspects, for instance. And how do they look at it? It's quite interesting because it is based on cross-checking information. So, for instance, the weak link in this kind of environment is the communication layer. So how does communication happen? It will be channeled through cell phone communication, so traditional 4G, but as well satellite-based communication. And the system will constantly monitor that the information that is channeled through those different communication layers, which are completely separated, are the same. So that if one is under attack or under threat, it can be immediately monitored and spotted. So it shows that by monitoring from a technology standpoint the environment and by using hybridation techniques and so on, we can actually make it safe, and I could even argue more secured sometimes than what we have in our own domain, where we have basically one communication link, which is a VHF radio today, and where we start to implement as well data communication, but we are not there yet. So with technology comes as well a number of solutions, and that's interesting as well to learn from that and to see how we can speed up things and maybe invest in the right way as well in our domain, because it's a huge investment for the airlines in particular. So we have to make sure that at the end, they are actually securable when they are implemented. And this is really what we are busy with in terms of research and development. How do we build a system that is securable, that is not something which we, at the end of the day, cannot get a grip on in terms of cybersecurity?
Great, thanks. Alexandre, airlines are the major stakeholder in this game, and as Florian's just pointed out, you're also paying the bill. So, what is your reaction to these changes? How can airlines best facilitate these changes whilst preserving your own interest? And perhaps even more importantly, what can we learn from what's happening in UTM and other areas, and therefore improve the performance of airlines?
The cybersecurity is a key issue for us. We are under attack almost every day. There is an airline which is hacked or almost every day. Even in IATA, our system has been hacked last week. So it is something that we live every day. There are three elements for us. You have all the big commercial IT systems that are open to everyone, because what you want is to purchase your ticket on the web, so it has to be open. So it is overexposed to any hacking system. So we have to work, but as many other industries, to protect through firewalls or cyber security system, these type of system. The second issue is the flight top systems, departure control system, the OCC IT system, in which we are now moving much more in the safety area. And for us, protecting that is absolutely critical, because otherwise it's a major disruption for our operations, but also it can raise safety issues. And then you have the third layer, which is the access to the cockpit, or the access to the key avionics systems for the aircraft. And that is something on which we are working, but the main issue is in the hands of the aircraft manufacturers and the avionic manufacturers, because they have to protect the aircraft. Up to now, what we know is the access to the cockpit is protected because physically it is still almost disconnected, not totally, but the connection between the cockpit and the outside world will be much more open due to electronic data exchange of maintenance data, technical data, operational data that will open the cockpit or the avionic KISS systems to external attacks. So that's for us what we share. We share this issue with the safety agencies, with the aircraft manufacturers. That's also the key point. Okay.
Thank you. So Pekka, having again listened to all of that, how is EASA changing its priorities to address these matters, and how do you see the priorities in terms of integration of new users into the airspace, the cybersecurity challenges, and so on?
Yes, those two are the main topics at the moment, no doubt. And regarding new entrants for the airspace, the main priorities at the moment, concept of operations. We have to understand how drones are operated. Actually, we only think we know something, but the fact is that we don't. And therefore, the cooperation with military side, because they have experience of decades already for those unmanned operations, it helps quite a lot. And therefore, we will publish concept of operations by the end of the year, and it is good starting point for to work further. And then, of course, cyber. As we have learned, sharing information is the cornerstone of safety work. The same applies also with cyber. We are building up, as everyone is doing, let's say, network of trusted partners to share the information. And that is also the idea that we are using as much as possible existing standards from the industry. And the cyber work, the regulation work, what is going on now, it is heavily industry driven because they have the experience what we don't have. So those are the two priorities indeed, new airspace users and the cyber that is at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. We have on stage four very different stakeholders in airspace management at the moment. And we always, in conferences like this, talk a lot about collaboration, cooperation, partnership. But what we're seeing ahead of us is a lot of change. And so are we doing enough to make sure that we have a common view of all of these subjects and a common way forward? Or should we be putting in place some new measures to make sure that we are fully aligned on these things? I open that to the panel generally.
Yeah. Please.
But from our side, we will not do something serious, efficient and secure without having a very, very strong cooperation, integrating the newcomers, the Google of this planet or the drones manufacturers, all that stuff. If they are not integrated into a global, holistic system, dealing with these issues, it will be a complete mess, and the safety will be at stake. I don't know if you share that view in EASA, but we cannot work separately. It's just impossible. Impossible.
Yes. But yes, it's not at all self-evident that the goal is common. But for example, returning back to the cyber question, it has been very fruitful field for cooperation because everyone has the same understanding. No one is asking why we are doing this business. And nowadays, I can see the same also more and more on the safety side. Because for all of us, the confidence of traveling public is key issue. If there is no confidence, they are minimizing the traveling. So first defining common goal, which in many cases is rather easy nowadays.
Okay. How do we do this? Again, it's great to say we need to cooperate, we need to work together. We've got good basis for that already through the work that's been done in the SESAR JU. The how is always a difficult thing in this industry. And for example, in air traffic management, we've been trying to raise awareness amongst our members of cybersecurity.
Yes.
But people all nod their head and say, yes, we need to look at cybersecurity, but not many people really understand it or know how they should react. And we've been thinking about this and say, well, how do you get this cybersecurity mentality embedded in what we're doing? So we're taking a bit of a different approach on that because we kind of say, well, actually, we're really good at safety, and we've got safety embedded as our number one priority. So we're now trying to take exactly the same approach with cybersecurity and use our safety methodologies to embed that. Alexandre or any of you, do you see similar methodologies being used in airlines or in the deployment of SESAR? Do we understand the how?
I can start with maybe some elements of it. I think there is an understanding of the how. I mean, safety is in the DNA of aviation, that's clear. So I think coupling it with the security and the cybersecurity aspect is something that I do see happening in all the discussions we have on this topic. I think where we start to see difficulties on the how is what is safety critical versus the rest. We had a tendency over the past to grow the safety critical dimension quite a lot to a point where it's somehow blocking the evolution. And I do see today some discussions with the regulators in particular on, okay, what can technology bring in terms of safety is counterbalanced by the difficulty to implement it to a certain extent, because it's a change, so it's a safety case, it's additional work, there is always a kind of risk in terms of implementation, how is it mitigated? So I see a situation where today even technologies that can actually bring safety benefits is somehow being challenged because everything tends to be coupled together. So I think there is a true thinking to put on those things, and I think one way to address it is to test things in a controlled environment with the regulator being fully involved so that it can be really not discovering the topic at the very last moment, but anticipating as well what technology or new operating modes can bring to the system. And this kind of sandbox idea where you bring the different actors together, including the industry, because the industry can provide as well solutions to the safety or the security dimension, I think is essential to progress.
Okay.
You know, for us, what we are doing is, so safety was at the heart of aviation. We had an industry committee in IATA in charge of operations, which was focused on safety. So we maintained that, but we'll probably create another industry committee in charge of security, physical and cyber. So for us, the key issue is to identify security as a topic that is at the same level, probably, has almost the same value as safety, with a lot of interrelations, of course, but you know, with the best specialists. And one of the key issues is that, you know, the number of real specialists in cybersecurity is not a big number. You have people talking, but real, you know, people working really, they are more in the military or intelligence agency area, frankly, between you and me. And that's another difficulty, that these people are not allowed to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I may add,
Yeah.
on safety side, the responsibilities and who is doing and what is very clear nowadays. We have common understanding, no doubt. But on cyber side, we are still on the phase that responsibilities are not clear and shared. That is what we have to work on European level and on state level as well. That is the step to be taken, has to be taken quite soon, I think so.
Okay.
And by the way, in EASA, we like to see security and safety much more together. That is what we would like to see. And it's not so, let's say, logical that we are taking security and safety separately. At the final end, failing in either of those is a catastrophe. So we like to speak much more together of those.
Excellent, good. Picking up on Alexandre's point about where the knowledge of cybersecurity exists today, we all know that aviation is the best industry and we're really good at what we're doing, but are we actually learning enough from other industries? And Alexandre was particularly thinking of, you know, IATA isn't just airline operations, you have a huge financial organization, very, very substantial, and cybersecurity in the finance industry is obviously very critical. Are you transferring lessons from your financial operations into the airline side?
But, you know, for financial systems, as you know, on our systems, you have something like $350 billion transiting every year. So it is airline money, by the way. It's not our money, so our responsibility is a bit heavy. So we are doing a lot of hacking tests and penetration tests that are done by specialists who are coming from the external world, external from aviation, I mean. So they are coming from the banking system to penetrate our system. And there are plenty other industries from which we can learn. Energy network, to give an example, health administration, banking, they can provide with solutions for. We have to be open to that. Huh?
Excellent.
Because they are facing the same issues.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that. Our 30 minutes is up. I'm not going to attempt to summarize that as moderator. I'm going to be extremely lazy and pass that over to our panelists and ask them to give a very, very short final thought on this whole issue of how we address the technologies, new entrants, and cyber security. Alexandre, would you like to?
So I would say three things. We have to work in cooperation, what I said. We have to work fast, because things are moving fast. We are under strong threat, especially for cybersecurity. And we have to integrate experiences from other industries, because in that area, we are not particularly ahead of the others. I would say we are even probably lagging behind in some part of what we are doing.
Okay, thanks. Florian?
I couldn't say anything better, so I will stop there.
Good answer. And
Pekka,
as a regulator, you always have the final word.
Yes, I like that. And let's say what happens around us all the time, it's very dynamic, more dynamic as ever before. So as I said, we cannot accept anymore that we are, on regulation side, we are well behind the development. No. But we have to remember that also our main concern is ICAO. They are very slow. And I think we should all together, for becoming assembly, to express ourselves clearly that ICAO processes must be more dynamic as they are today. But working together, that is the key element, learning from each other's.
Okay, that's a great message to end this panel on. Thank you very much. I hope that's been short, sharp, focused, and interesting for you. It has been for me listening to my colleagues here, so please join me in thanking the panel for a great session.
Thank you for the moderator.
Thank you.